The big space news of the day is that the dearMoon project has been canceled. And unfortunately, this just adds further proof that SpaceX is really focusing on its government customers and not the private individuals who hope to fly on Starship. I'm Laura Forsick. I'm the executive director of space consulting firm Astrolytical. I've been in the space sector for 20 years, and I have been looking at this mission since it was announced in 2018. I have been skeptical. I've been so super supportive of this mission, but I've also been skeptical of this mission. And unfortunately, anybody who's been paying attention was not necessarily surprised by today's news. It's unfortunate. I was really disappointed, but it really was a long time coming, in that we have known for a while that this was going under strain, that this mission was delayed and delayed indefinitely. But just to go back in time, so September 2018, there was this announcement made that the dearMoon project, and there was a hashtag in there, dearMoon project was going to fly creatives to the moon, circumlunar, so not landing on the moon, but going around the moon on a Starship. Super exciting. The big thought at the time was that SpaceX really needed this boost in funding in order to get Starship really moving. I can't even remember who it was called Starship at the time. It's gone through so many iterations of names, but the vehicle we now know as Starship was still very, very, very much in development. Of course, still in development now, but it was so early that there was one point in that same time frame that SpaceX was really under financial strain with all of the things going on in the company. And so the idea was at that time, and I've got no insider information here, that SpaceX really needed this boost, this deposit from a private individual to really get Starship moving. And then Starship was chosen by NASA to bring the lunar astronauts to the surface of the moon in Artemis 3, and then later Artemis 4 as well. And that really changed SpaceX's priorities. We saw them really shift because NASA's a major customer. It's a major customer for Falcon 9. It's a major customer for International Space Station crew delivery. And NASA is credited by Elon Musk as saving the company. Because early in SpaceX's formation, when it had failure after failure, it was really NASA that really put in that funds and trusted SpaceX to get there, that really saved the company. So the priority for Starship has been for quite some time now the Artemis 3 mission. And unfortunately, that means that dearMoon project was really kind of put in the back burner. It was one of these things that just became lesser priority, even though we saw periodic announcements. So we saw, unfortunately, we saw an announcement in 2020 that there was going to be like a matchmaking dating thing associated, reality show kind of thing associated with it. I'm glad that didn't happen. He got a lot of backlash on that. He being the funder of the mission, whose name I can never remember. I apologize. I don't know why I can never remember his name. Yusaku, shoot. And of course I don't have it in front of me, because why would I have it in front of me? But I'll get back to it. So I'm glad that didn't happen. There was the crew announcement back in, I want to say 2023. And I think that was where there was a contest and people could submit to be part of the crew and fly to this mission, this lunar mission for free, fly to the moon for free. And I admit I applied, I applied to all of these contests, and unfortunately they were really going for people who had much bigger followings than I do. And so I was super excited to see Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, get selected. I didn't know the rest of the crew members who were selected, so I was thrilled for them, but I was really thrilled for Tim because, he is so part of the space community. And following along with his excitement and all the things that he was hoping to do once he was on that dearMoon mission, it was thrilling. Like, I don't know if you got sucked into it, but I certainly did. I really wanted to see this mission go forward. But I do want to pull up a blog article that I wrote back when I was actually writing blogs. This was from the day after dearMoon project was released, or, announced, September 18th, 2018. So I wrote, "The analyst in me is skeptical this mission will happen, but the soul inside of me hopes that it does." So even back then, I didn't know if this was going to happen. And actually, Elon Musk had said that this might not happen either. He had written something along the lines of, why do I have these things not open when I want them? We're definitely not sure about the 2023 date, we need to set a things go right date, and we're not sure we can bring it to flight, but we're going to do everything humanly possible. So even at the announcement in September 2018, Elon Musk was saying, the date is uncertain, the 2023 date is uncertain, the mission itself is uncertain, but we're going to try, quote, to do everything humanly possible, end quote, to make it happen. Yusaku Maezawa, I so apologize, I can never get that right, but he is the one who was funding this mission for himself and for 8 additional creatives to fly on dearMoon, and then the idea was to bring some SpaceX employees as well. Not happening. And so we got the announcement November of last year, 2023, that it was delayed indefinitely, which no one was surprised about, because even at that time of the announcement, we knew that 2023 date was very unrealistic. I don't know if anybody who actually follows space really thought that it was going to happen in 2023. It's just one of those things where it's a brand new rocket. Any brand new rocket needs to be tested and developed very, very well in order to put people on board, in order to do something that no rocket has done since the Apollo era. That was the last time we had a human-rated rocket go to the moon. Not even like land on the moon, just go to the moon, right? And unfortunately, I think maybe some people are using the timing as an excuse. And by some people, I do mean Yusaku Maezawa is using the timing as an excuse to back out of this mission. So he had the last Space Adventures mission to the International Space Station before Russia invaded Ukraine. So let me back up and explain that since 2000, Space Adventures, a private company, has been partnering with Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, to bring private paying individuals to the space station, starting with Dennis Tito. And he flew, Yusaku Maezawa flew with his colleague, someone who helped him film YouTube videos, to the International Space Station back in 2019. I think it was December of 2019. Really cool, actually, series of YouTube videos. I'll link them down below. And I think that got him, set with his space thing. He was able to float for a few days on the International Space Station. It's not the moon, of course, but it was something that he could tangibly do in the moment when he was excited about space. And then, like I said, Russia invaded Ukraine. That really cut off that avenue of transportation from an American company, Space Adventures, to Roscosmos. Space Adventures is essentially gone now. They haven't had missions since then. I don't think he was the CEO, but the person who was leading Space Adventures, he took another job. So that was essentially the last mission that could go through Space Adventures. Now there's still missions going through Axiom and SpaceX, but that mission there really kind of, I think, scratched that itch for Yusaku Maezawa so that he could fly to space. And it's quite unfortunate that he, for whatever reason, is backing out of this mission, because he got the excitement levels up for the crew that he selected. He didn't need to select a crew, right? He could have just said, we are postponing crew selection. He could have done things so differently, but instead he got the hopes up of Tim Dodd and other people who were part of this mission, and selected backup crew as well. And unfortunately, those people had no say, at least according to them. They were not consulted in the cancellation of this project, which of course, maybe they shouldn't be, they're not paying, but still, imagine that you're selected to go to the moon, and then you're a year and a half into thinking about your future, planning for your future to go to the moon, and then it's just abruptly canceled. I think that would tear my heart out. I don't know about you, but my dream is to go to space, and especially the moon, and that would just break my heart to have this mindset that I'm going to go fulfill this dream of mine, and then it's gone. It's gone. And there's nothing I can say or do to change it, because I'm not a billionaire. You're not a billionaire, most likely. So what can you do? You can't. And so when I think about the future of lunar tourism, or space tourism with SpaceX in general, on Starship in particular, Falcon 9's a different story. Falcon 9's flying every few days. It's pretty well set with Crew Dragon. With Starship has its Artemis 3 missions. Starship has its Artemis 4 missions. Starship has additional uncrewed missions on the books where it needs to first test out the landing, the Starship variant landing on the moon. so it can prove to so it can prove to NASA that it can land safely on the moon. And it also has a cargo variant that it's working on for after Artemis 3, so it can bring large amounts of cargo to the moon, to the surface of the moon. And the Department of Defense is also interested. There's no formal contracts yet, but for years now, the DoD has been talking about using Starship for, rapid cargo delivery, for other uses. And so when you're thinking about the future of Starship, you really think that the highest priority missions are going to be government missions. SpaceX is not going to piss off NASA. SpaceX is not going to piss off the DoD by canceling their missions or by doing anything that would deprioritize those missions. In fact, several years ago, back when Jim Bridenstine was the center director of NASA during the Trump administration, was the NASA administrator during the Trump administration. For whatever reason, publicly, Jim Bridenstine felt that he needed to criticize the priorities that SpaceX had, and critically said that SpaceX needs to reprioritize NASA. And ever since then, you really do see SpaceX prioritizing NASA's missions. And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. Maybe if you go a few decades, they can do both very easily, right? They've already proven that they can do these private missions on Axiom, with Axiom, I should say, to the International Space Station, along with the NASA missions, the NASA crew missions to the International Space Station. So SpaceX can prove that it can do both, but it can't do both with a new rocket. They really need to prioritize Starship. Starship has not yet made it to safe and back down to Earth safely uncrewed. So that needs to happen this year. Really hopeful that that's going to happen actually within the next few weeks. Crossing fingers, rooting for you, Starship, that you can get to space and then come back down, re-entry in the way that you're supposed to, so that we can get practice doing that, so we can then send that uncrewed mission to the moon and get things ready for Artemis 3. And that is the priority right now. So what does that mean for other missions, other private missions that we're hoping to use Starship? We have Dennis Tito, again, from Space Adventures back in 2000 going to the ISS, that same Dennis Tito. He wants to take his wife, Akito, to a Starship mission. So he has actually booked 2 seats on a future Starship mission. That is small potatoes, I am sure, compared to a government mission. And therefore, especially since that mission is not completely bought out, it's just 2 seats, I would expect that to be the least priority of any of the Starship missions out there. We have the Polaris program. I don't know what to think about the priorities of the Polaris program when it comes to Starship. It's obviously a very high priority when it comes to the Falcon 9, the EVA, the extravehicular activity, the testing of the EVA suits, the space suits, the pressure suits, all that super high priority, gonna happen this summer. Really excited for it. But then when it comes to, is it Polaris 3? Why do I not have these things memorized? I am so sorry. So Polaris Dawn's the first one. I think it's Polaris 3 that is planning to use, I have my notes in front of me, it's just too many notes, that is planning to use Starship. And my guess is that is a much lower priority than any of the government Starship missions, because if they need to, they can either do another Polaris mission using Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy or whatever, or they can just simply delay the Starship Polaris mission for quite some time. And we've already seen Polaris Dawn delayed for about a year now, right? So it wouldn't be too surprising. Now, I think Jared Isaacman is a really good customer for SpaceX, so I don't think SpaceX wants to, really treat Jared Isaacman as a second-class citizen, because he's certainly not. He seems to be really well-versed in what SpaceX is doing. 2 SpaceX employees are flying on Polaris Dawn mission. So I just don't know what that means in terms of priorities. It's certainly a higher priority than the Dennis Tito Starship mission, but I wouldn't say that it is high priority compared to Artemis 3. Artemis 3 has got to be their number 1. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, is that, well, no, actually there's a little bit more that I want to say, in that when it comes to treating people right, I think it's really important to realize that people, change their whole lives around certain things that they are given or told. And so if you are giving people an opportunity to fly, and even if there's no expectation that it's going to fly on the date that you say it's going to fly in 2023. Obviously, it didn't fly. I don't think any of the crew members that were selected thought that it was going to fly in 2023. And I'd be super shocked if any of the crew members selected, and this is again for the dearMoon project, if any of the dearMoon project crew members actually cared whether it was going to fly in 2023 or 2024, 2025 or 2026. My guess is they were all signed up for a mission to the moon regardless of what year, and they were willing to wait. And if you think about all of the, the back, what's it called? The back orders, maybe that's the way to put it. The people who have been waiting so long for their flights, for Virgin Galactic, for Blue Origin, who had a year-long gap between their uncrewed incident on New Shepard and the mission that just flew on New Shepard with crew on board. There are, I'm sure, other customers that are signed up for Blue that have been delayed. Virgin Galactic's, like 20 years delayed, and I honestly do not know if that company is going to survive before it can fly some of those early customers or even the later customers to space on a suborbital vehicle. So regardless if you paid or not, if you are thinking that you want to fly to space, whether it's a suborbital mission, whether it's an ISS mission, whether it's a lunar mission, and you are really set on that, and someone told you this is happening, we don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen, and you're going to wait, and then that's pulled out from under you without you even being consulted, that really sucks. It really does. So I don't think this was handled very well. My heart goes out to Tim Dodd and to the other crew members who were expecting this to happen. It really does sound like one person, the funder, got impatient and lost a lot of his funding, his net worth. And I think there were probably other things going on behind the scenes, but I'm not privy to know that. And really just did not handle this well at all. And it's probably a lesson learned that if you are not the funder of a mission, if you are gifted the mission, if you are being paid by an employer or even a government agency, then you cannot control whether this mission is actually going to happen. Even if you are a funder, even if you even bought a Virgin Galactic flight back in, the early 2000s and really thought that you were one of those first people who was going to fly, no guarantee it's going to happen. And I'm sure that's written in the contract somewhere too. So it is still so unproven. The non-government private astronaut missions, however you want to phrase them, spaceflight participants, it's so nascent, it's so unproven. And until we get it so that SpaceX or any other company is really launching very frequently, much more frequently much more frequently crewed than they are now. Of course, they're doing Starship, they're doing Starlink missions all the time. But there's a difference between a mission that has people on board, which is a lot more serious, a lot more care, and an uncrewed mission of Starlinks. How many Starlinks are they producing all the time? Of course, they don't want to lose their Starlinks. That's not what I'm saying. But, we are very far from spaceflight being air flight, which is no surprise to any of you. But if you put a down deposit on a ticket, or if you're gifted one, because we want to say that space is open for all, including non-wealthy people, to fly to space, you just can't put your hopes in it actually happening. I do think that I will someday fly to space. It might not be for another several decades. I might be as old as some of these people who are flying on Blue Origin's missions, and that's okay. But I have no illusions that any of these early companies, even SpaceX, as reliable as they have been, will actually get me to space. I really hope so. I hope that I'm flying on a future Starship mission or a future other mission, but you really can't hope on it. What you can hope for is that if you are a NASA astronaut, then you are highest priority. If you are a partner agency, ESA, JAXA, CSA, then you are probably a higher priority. If you are flying through Axiom, but you're still a government customer, there's been Italian space agents, not Italian space agents, the Italian Air Force and other, Turkish sponsored astronaut and others who are sponsored by their governments, probably a somewhat high priority because of the geopolitics involved, but probably not as high as a NASA astronaut in terms of priority. If you're a private individual who is not associated with a government, not being paid by government, I think we still have a long way to go in order to get to space. And like I wrote back in 2018, my analyst hat, I am skeptical, but my heart still wants this to happen, and I believe you do as well. I'm going to link, if you're curious about the types of lunar missions that are out there in terms of government, in terms of commercial for people. I did a whole video on that. I will link this after that. Let me know how you like this format. I stopped doing videos because the editing and the timing, I was trying to do them every Friday at 1 o'clock live, and my schedule just couldn't accommodate that anymore. And the editing, I can't do the editing. So let me know if you like this kind of off the cuff format. I know I mess up my words a lot. Sorry about that. But, you know, it's better than not posting, right? But still let me know how you like it, if it needs to be improved. And if you are interested more in lunar transportation or lunar tourism missions, watch the video next.